and welcome back to Chi Talks. I'm Javi, here with Nona, my co-host. We are joining you today with our good friend Sifu Paul Mcintyre from Newport Laukundo Temple of Martial Arts. We met Paul about 10 years ago now at the retreat center, and been studying with him and just becoming friends and brothers and sisters since that time. So thanks for being here with us today.
My pleasure.
And we call him Paul. Of course, you go by Sifu McIntyre.
That's okay. It's okay.
Dad to
Yeah, still
Three
dad.
beautiful
My little
daughters.
girls.
still dad. Yeah, beautiful family. Let's see. Well, okay, a little bit about Paul. He's a good friend, right? Let's get this bio out of the way. One of the things that stands out for me is your athleticism, but you've been studying martial arts for a long time. As we said, you've been studying with Dr. Yang for 10 years now. So you teach Tai Chi, Qigong. We're going to get into the Qigong and meditation, Wing Chun, Lao Kundo, and you've been doing these for a number of years
Yes,
as
sir.
well. Let's see. There was something in your bio that stood out to me. The second highest ranking disciple of the temple and teacher of the highest regard within the system. Direct lineage under Grandmaster Sim.
Yes.
I would say that's quite an accomplishment.
I mean, it sounds like a horn tooting, a self horn tooting, really. But this was not really my words. Those were his words.
Okay.
Yeah. Within that system, there are very few of us that have continued to train there that long, and even fewer still that have become branch temple keepers within that system. So I'm one of a very small group of disciples that had reached the highest ranking that he allows prior to becoming a branch temple keeper. And just by happenstance, I stayed longer. Maybe my head was a little thicker. Maybe I was a little slower. I guess it depends on who you ask. But I stayed longer to deepen the training to get to a stage that I felt it was appropriate to take the title Shifu, because I didn't think I knew the weight of that title. And so I drug my feet a little bit longer and kept training and trying to deepen what I knew before I was willing to do that. So I guess that's how I arrived at that position, maybe. Yeah.
Always a noble man you are.
Trying. Maybe
And
hiding. I don't know. I could have been hiding. I don't know.
and I just want to say, I really appreciate, in terms of the martial arts teaching and business, I really appreciate the fact that you run a temple, and it's called a temple.
Right.
And we've talked about before, like how the arts have come down from the monastery. So I want to maybe we'll touch on that before we get into the show. Let's do the guided breathing exercise.
Sure.
And then we'll dive into that, so our listeners will be gifted today by your facilitation.
Great. Well, I appreciate that. I thought maybe what we could do today, since we're going to be talking a little bit about the approach that I've used to try to help students and others, by starting to evaluate ourselves. So always one of the first steps, as we're taught, of course, is to learn to turn from the outside inside. And one of the easiest ways to do that, of course, is to close the eyes. But before we close the eyes, what I would like to do with this kind of self-assessment, and of course, I do it for myself many times a day. I advocate students do it as often as they feel is appropriate. And what I would ask the listeners to do is try to focus on one of three areas, to pay attention to how your body feels. And in that, do I feel tense? Do I feel some sort of pain? Is there discomfort? Do I just feel physically uneasy? Those types of awarenesses. The second would be the breath. How is my breath? How is my breathing? And you might consider things like, where is the breath originating from? Do I feel the breath coming from my chest? My chest is rising and falling? Or do I feel that it's my abdomen rising and falling, or a combination thereof? Both. Do I feel like my breath is rushed or short? Or is it heavy or labored? Is it soft or smooth? A lot of interesting contextual awarenesses around breath. So we have body's awareness, breath is awareness, and then the last one is the mind. This one usually gets the most attention for the listeners who maybe are brand new to this concept. The mind is usually a little chaotic, and I'm sure we'll dive into that. So in this approach, which I'm sure we only really need 1 to 2 minutes, and we're going to do it with the eyes closed, going from outside to inside. We're not trying to fix anything. So we're not trying to change anything. We're just trying to become aware. How is my body? How is my breath? And how is my mind? So maybe if we could start, no adjustments, no judgment. Don't be harsh on yourself, right? Just evaluate. So we'll start with maybe eyes closed and go for 60 to 90 seconds. I can call us out or you can call us out. What would you prefer?
Yeah, you go ahead, guide the facilitation.
Okay, great. So if everybody would, go ahead and close your eyes. Just sit comfortably. You don't need any formal seating position. Bring your awareness to your body first and just take a gentle inventory. Again, no judgment and not seeking to make change. Slowly become aware of your breath. Try to assess the nature of your breath, where it's coming from, how it feels to draw air in the body, its length, any difficulty associated with breath. And while not looking at it, just become aware of the behavior of your mind. We're looking to see which one of these three things, the body, the breath, or the mind, seems the most out of harmony, or the one that desires the most attention from you. Now, when you understand which one of those three you feel wants the most attention, the one that's the most out of tune, I just want you to take a quick moment to consider a scale of 1 to 5. 1 would be just barely registering, and a 5 would be you feel like you're ready to burst. So try to give a number of 1 through 5 on either body, breath, or mind that's seeking the most attention. And then slowly go ahead and bring your eyes back open, and make sure you open your ears slowly to listen to what we're going to share. Good. Now, just as a quick reminder, we tried to look at body, number 1, breath, number 2, or mind, number 3. And when we find which one of those 3 seems to be the most disharmonious, right? Like the child that's jumping up and down the most, that wants the most attention, waving its arms, that's the one that we would focus on. And normally I would label those 1, 2, or 3. And then we want to give that a scale of 1 to 5. And that's going to be important later, because if we get to come revisit this, we want to see if we've been able to modulate those 3 and to make a shift in the way your state is now. And if we can change how body, breath, or mind relate to you. So we're going to work on the baseline from today, 1 through 5. Okay. Good. I tried to also relax you with my calm, soothing radio voice. So I don't know if I got you.
Oh, it works. Oh, it works.
Okay.
That was great. A great facilitation. What came up for you?
Oh gosh. Definitely the mind was my number one. a little bit of recognize that child.
How about for
I
you,
have to
Javi?
say that, yeah, I have to say the same for me, the mind. Yeah.
And how about 1 through 5?
It was about 3, 2 or 3.
Nona?
Yeah.
Mine's all like about a,
Okay. Closer
there's
to
a
a
lot
4.
going on. Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yeah, so
So
great tool, because by the way, you might find if we did exactly the same thing tomorrow at exactly the same time after the same day, you might just through the process of reassessing say, it's different than yesterday. If that was a 4, today is definitely a 3. But as we continue to come back to that assessment, guess what happens? The relativity of that scale, that baseline, we start to realize, wow, on Tuesday, I was at about a 27.
Mhm.
Not a 4 or something
Gotcha.
less than that, right? So the relativity of that baseline scale becomes, we are fine tuning our powers of awareness and self kind of discovery and exploration every time we step in to assess those elements. Yeah, which I think over time has proven to become a really wonderful tool for people, and you can do it anywhere.
Right.
Yeah,
so useful. It's like collecting data for yourself.
exactly right.
Like a very, non-attached understanding of the process. So, and it's like knowledge is power.
Absolutely. Knowledge of self, no doubt, right? Yeah.
Definitely, yeah, and that's what big part of this is about. And
Nature Kung Fu.
nature Kung Fu.
Mhm.
And
And yeah.
are you looking to do a reminder for our listeners?
Yeah. We are, you got attuned to K-Mud, and we are doing Chi Talks. I'm Javi, and I'm here with Donna, and our guest today is Sifu Paul Mcintyre from Newport Lao Kun Do. And we've had many talks around the island over tea about Tai Chi, Qigong, the mind. Um, and I wanted to get back to your facilitation and talk about integration, because that's something that's important, like for me to help. Well, first of all, like, you really want to be able to use what you learn. I really want to be able to use what I learn in real life and help others do that as well. And for this guided practice, it's one of those things where you're doing your assessment and you want to be able to have those tools accessible in those, ready to burst, 27 level 27 moments,
Mm,
right? That's the goal, right? The
yes.
integration and pulling that tool out of your bag and being like, hold on, like, I'm not this, this is gonna pass, it's temporary, I can bring this down to, 1, 0, right?
Well,
So
and
I think,
if I could add in
go
too, I
ahead.
think,
Yeah.
Javi, what's really
Hmm.
interesting is because I've known you two for a long time, this is a skill like anything else. Do my eyes have to be closed to get the information I seek? No. The better I become at identifying my own baseline, what is normal for me? What is good for me? When am I at my best? This is why I advocate it doesn't take a long time, 60 to 120 seconds. Don't overdo it. Learn to be able to check in with yourself swiftly, not in a hurry, but to be able to do it quickly. I know exactly where my body, mind, and breath are at relative to the rest of my days. Then if I'm at work, if I'm at a desk, if I'm driving the car and I find myself in traffic or what have you, there's times where we can't close our eyes. But the more times you visit this, you don't need to close your eyes. You're only then paying attention to look within. Even though my eyes are open, I start to feel, to sense, which we've talked about, right? Can you sense what is happening within? Because to look obviously implies that I'm physically closing my eyes and somehow inverting my eyeballs, which is not occurring. But to build that feeling of sensing what's happening within, eventually I don't need to close my eyes. It's only becoming present, if you will. This is an interesting term, but I have to become really present in the moment to assess my body, breath, and mind, to get a sense of where it's at. It's in that awareness that we're able to many times disassociate with what's going on and kind of get a grip on what's happening. And that to me is one of the real powerful tools. How do we in layman society, with jobs and kids and cars and traffic and all of the chaos that comes with life, just like you said, how can we take some of these really powerful and transformative tools and weave them into daily life? Some of us can't practice for hours on end every day. Some of us have got 5 or 10 minutes and that's it, or maybe less. But can we develop a skill, or can we share a skill? Like with your listeners, many have probably never even attempted meditation, or attempted it and maybe it didn't go well, or maybe some, of course there's a spectrum. But to me, this skill is like, as we've worked on together, right? When you're trying to develop deeper meditative skill. And I'm sure we can talk about the mind's behavior. But to me, this is a sneaky way, without actually meditating, to learn to disassociate self from thoughts, self from self-awareness. So we are just through the practice of looking to see what's under the hood, we are starting to differentiate our awareness from what we are sensing. That's building the skill to actually be able to go deeper if we want to.
Totally key.
I would say, yeah, you're stepping into the observer relative to the observed mind and consciousness. Consciousness, I would say, the observer consciousness, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And as you said, I forget who it was. Was it the highest form of intelligence is being able to observe without judgment? Was that Rumi? I think. Yeah.
Would not surprise me.
Let's see, where can we go from here?
That, by the way, if I could talk about that, because I think that's an important point.
Sure.
How many of you listeners, when you figured out which one of those three was out of tune, immediately started trying to monkey with it to see if you could get it to change?
Yeah.
And I'm willing to bet you, especially if it was body or breath, mind is trickier, right? Because the mind is not an easy tool to get a handle on. But boy, I feel tense. I need to adjust my body a little bit. My shoulders are, my tight. You will unconsciously start to make a change because you see what's happening. I'm breathing short. You start to adjust. This is not necessarily associated to judgment per se, but that's why I was keen to say, don't try to fix it.
Right.
Because it's the state you're in. You can fix it later, but assess it without judging yourself first, then start to fix and reassess. Now you've identified something, you've input a change, a stimulus on the system, you are making a change, and then you are reassessing the outcome of the change that you provided. Every time I repeat this process, assess, modify, or interact with myself, make a change, and then reassess with a positive outcome, right? I'm trending the direction I want. That's one brick, one rung on the ladder to building a successful trust and faith within myself. I can sense what's wrong or what's troubling me. I know how to breathe, move, or calm the mind, which we can chat about, and I can adjust myself. I can become the mechanic of myself. And then when I reassess, I'll be darned if I wasn't able to make the adjustment I seek. Every time I do that, I trust myself more and more deeply that I can repeat what I did before. So in a way, this is a rewarding fulfillment cycle to not judge, but to identify where I'm at. Then I'm going to make a change. I'm going to try to make a change. Sometimes it works well, sometimes maybe not so well, but I'm trying to make a change based on what I understand. And of course, that's where they can listen to your show. They can absorb more knowledge, more information that you two share, that guests share, and pick up little tools or things that they read. They can just integrate that into their awareness of how to mitigate body, breath, and mind. And there are others, of course, we can talk about, which you two know, right? 5 regulatings theory. But I'm really talking about the 3 most readily accessible. These 3 are what I call the 3 levers, the 3 levers of action. If you imagine like levers that you pull on a slot machine, right? Okay. Lever number 1, that's the body. Lever number 2, that's the breath. Lever number 3, that's the mind. So these levers would be interpreted by, when I pull that lever, what happens? So what is a lever? The lever then would be if my body is tense. What do you think, for you two, what would be a good way if my body is tense and I notice some pain or some tension? What would be a good way to eliminate that, do you think? Maybe based on past shows.
Massage, stretch.
Or
massage.
Just move.
Yeah. Yeah.
Right? I don't know all those fancy moves you guys teach. I don't know all the stuff. I don't know how to massage myself. Can you walk? I could do that. Wonderful. You can go for a walk. You could get a massage. Maybe you can just stand up and shake, right? Just move the body. Maybe you can swing your arms. Maybe, okay, well, I have a bicycle. Sure. Movement, right? Allows the energy in the body to begin to normalize, to begin to rebalance itself, right? Which we've been taught. So I always tell people, don't make it complicated. Move. Do something that makes you feel good.
So, like, I really love this framework that you've given. First of all, with the assessment to begin with, I think that's so. I'm sorry, I'm backtracking just a little bit here, just because, the first time you talked to us about wanting to introduce this on the show, it was fantastic. Immediately, it's so important, in any activity that we do, to take an initial assessment and then an endpoint, just to bring your awareness to what has actually happened through engaging in the activity. So first of all, bring the mind there. And then second of all, you're talking about not judging, not fixing. So now you've created this pause. And, I've been talking in my classes a lot about, okay, really Qigong is habit forming, right? Creating habits that now serve you, now work for you. Well, we've been picking up all these habits through our life that don't serve us. And so this extra pause of the assessment, of the observation, really gives you time between the sensing and the noticing or unconscious and the habitual fix that you might have entered into, that maybe if you actually assessed that habitual, non-helpful habitual, practice, you'd assess at the end and go, oh wait, did that actually help? Oh, maybe not. And then, and so on both ends, you can catch the habit so that you can then be motivated or give even that space or awareness to address that and maybe insert a different type of habit in the place.
Absolutely.
Of that. So I think that's beautiful.
Absolutely.
Like it's magical in so many ways, that habit of being able to include that assessment every day. And then when you talk about other thought that I had, you're talking about these levers, the metaphor is so wonderful too there, because a lever, what does it do? It helps you perform work, right? It helps take the load off something. So to be able to address yourself and the work that you need to do for yourself to help you move through life in a more healthful way, more vibrant way, is like, that separating that out to different levels that will give you that power to do so. I think that's fantastic. So I think we're gonna be able to touch on those, right, Paul? This
Absolutely.
part of the idea. Yeah.
Okay, I
Awesome.
want to take a second and just remind the listeners that you're listening to Chi Talks with Javi and Nona on Redwood Community Radio, KMUD, and our guest today is Sifu Paul Mcintyre. We're talking about self-assessment, a meditation framework, and integrating that into your life to look from the outside in, see what's going on with your body, in your bodyscape, your breathscape, and your mentalscape as well, as he calls this three levers. And as you mentioned, comes from what we have been taught as the five regulations: body, breath, mind, the chi, and spirit are the last two of the regulations.
But I think, Paul, you were saying that those are the most accessible. I usually talk about they're tangible. They go from most physical and, you can see it, touch it, to like gradually more and more ethereal and like
Yeah.
vague, So yeah, the access to it definitely changes as you move along. Of course, it's not a linear process or progression by any means. It's all very layered upon one another. So
Yeah, and
it's
I think
great.
this concept too, which there's two things you said, Nona, that I think were valuable, and something Javi just said, which just for the listeners I think is really important. Sometimes as teachers, we love this stuff, right? So we love getting into the mud and really diving deep and understanding all of these things. And I've come to find that people lie typically somewhere on a spectrum of that. Some people really want to, as a mentor of mine used to say, want to know how the watch works. Some people just want to know what time it is.
Mm-hmm. That's
Some
great.
some people are like, I'm not interested in all of the stuff. I just want to know how to get out of this state. I just want to know how not to be the way things are right now. And like Javi, when we were talking about this relative to meditation, that word is scary for some people. So how about the concept of this being in some ways less about meditation and more about self-awareness, self-evaluating, self-adjusting, or just caring enough to listen to yourself and become aware of what's going on inside of you, and then learning to be able to make a change. Well, I thought we were meditating.
Yeah.
Okay, in some ways that is a form of meditation, but do you have to put a label on that? Of course not.
Right.
Well, does that mean I have to sit in full lotus and close my eyes and sing some songs and do? No, you don't have to do any of those things. Well, then am I going to get a benefit? It depends on if you desire to know yourself better. It depends on if you desire to know what's going on within, and maybe start to recognize that some things are happening without you being aware. And if you go that far, maybe we can help you understand that you can make a better you. You can change yourself right now, day one, by learning some very basic things to practice if they haven't already learned it on your show, and feel that they can do it. It's not so complicated. I can jot down these three lever things. I can jot down this idea of assessing without judging or without trying to change. And then we can talk about, as we already started with the levers, what does it mean to affect body or affect breath or affect mind? And then can I go back and find out what the change was? Yes, you can. Can I repeat that process? Yes, you can. Do I need to know all the fancy stuff to do that? No, you do not. If you can just remember the basics, and look, even if all the listener gets out of maybe our chat today is to say, I'm just going to kind of pay attention to what's happening inside. Good for you. If you weren't doing it before, you are already better. The question is how far into better you desire to go, because there's a tremendously long tail to better, a lifetime of kind of joyful changes and transitions, right? So if we could maybe jump back into this concept of levers.
Okay.
Good.
Oh, there you go. Sorry, I had to switch headphones. They're dying on me. So this concept of levers that you were talking about, Nona, I wanted to mention one thing. So we were talking about using movement or any different type of movement. If we move, will there be a change? Some change is going to occur within the body. Is it the change that we desire? Well, we don't know until we do it and we identify what the change created. So this is, in a way, just a very simple, again, non-judgmental. If I say, I notice that my body is pretty high out of alignment, and Javi says, no problem, Paul, let's go run the mountain, which for your listeners, they may not recognize that. Pick a mountain that you would run up, okay? And we think, okay, all right, well, I guess we'll go run the mountain. And we finish and I say, and you say, Paul, why don't you reassess your body? How is my body going to speak? It's going to say, what in the world were you thinking? Did that stimulus give me what I wanted? No, now my legs are maybe on fire. My body is tense. I pushed too hard. I chose a movement modality that's too much for me. I either did too much in volume or too much intensity, or this movement didn't give me the result I'm looking for. There's nothing wrong with that, as long as we assess it and we find out how it made us feel. So the next time we have something going on with body, no problem, we'll try something different. Maybe I'll just go for a nice little walk around the block. Maybe I'll just stand in a room and swing my arms side to side and just relax myself. Any number of these different kinds of things that I can try, and then through self-assessment, in a way categorize, well, I know how that makes me feel, and I like that. That makes me feel better, so I'm going to do more of that. And of course, if we pull the breath lever, right? My breath is, what is the nature of your breath? Did the breath feel shallow? Did I find out that it seems like I am short on air, like I feel like I'm oxygen deprived? Did it feel like I was breathing heavy from my chest, or that my breath was labored? Or did I feel like my breath was very slender, very relaxed, very, very calm, very natural, or from my abdomen? Of course, I'm sure you've already talked about several different things with past guests or on your show for your listeners. What do I do to adjust breath? That's a whole show, right? But there are some great tools. Maybe I'm going to try, which we could do tonight, to put my hands on my abdomen, to close my mouth and try to breathe through my nose as best I can and take 5 long, slow, smooth breaths. And try to feel that in the hands, in the abdomen. And then, of course, reassess again and see how that made you feel. And of course, without diving into it, could you do fire breathing? Could you do breath holding? You could do any number of different things, box breathing, you could do any number of different types of breathing. The question is, did that give you what you needed to bring the breath number? If your breath is that kid who's crazy running around in the room, did the type of breathing you did cause your mind or your breath to calm down and take the state that you're looking for? Yes or no? And I know you're both fired up about what happens when you pull the mind lever. The mind lever is a tricky lever, as you both know. So this is a really important thing, I think, for the listeners, at least in my humble experience, to understand. Sometimes when the mind is the one that's craziest. So let's say, Nona, if we can, you said, yeah, mind was, let's say, a 3 or 4 for me. What do we do to adjust the mind by pulling the mind lever? Now, this is a tricky one because you talked about habits. And when people want to try to modulate their mind, there are some good habits and there are some suboptimal habits, right? Which may or may not yield the benefit that we want. So We can talk about ways to adjust the mind, but typically I will say, you're trying to use the mind to adjust the mind. That requires skill. Doesn't mean you
Okay.
can't do it, but if my mind is chaos and I try to step into chaos to manage chaos, that's a lot of chaos.
Chaos
So now
will
watch,
eat you up.
that's right. Now watch this fun thing. So simple question for the audience. Think to yourself, because you know this intuitively. If I move my body in some way, is my breath going to be the same or change? Change. If my body moves and my breath changes, is my mind going to remain the same?
Gonna
Change.
change.
How about if instead I adjust my breath? If I adjust my breath, will my body feel the same or will it change?
Change.
Change.
It will change. If I use my breath, will my mind remain the same or change?
Change.
Absolutely. How much? That's a relative scale. But the point is, if I begin with body, I impact mind, I impact breath. If I begin with breath, breath impacts body, upregulation or downregulation. And for the listeners, what does that mean? Let's just say simply, upregulation would mean to stimulate, right? So in simple
Excite.
terms, to go for a jog, that will upregulate your body. To lay down flat on the bed and do calm belly breathing, that will downregulate your body, just for relative terms, right? So if I use my breath, I am, depending on the breath practice, I am likely going to affect or downregulate the body. Those two combined will absolutely begin to downregulate the mind. So what are we really saying? Should I go pull the mind lever to work on the mind? Or if I don't have experience, maybe I should start with body lever or breath lever. Those are pretty accessible. I think I could do those. I can go for a walk. I can put my hands on my belly and I can try to calm my breath. Maybe not 5 breaths, maybe 10 breaths or 15 breaths. I can do those things. That's right. I can manage something like that. And then I can see, how is my mind impacted? So these are, in a way, self-fulfilling levers, so to speak. They commingle, they interact with one another, and they directly affect the outcome or the state of one another. That's why I personally choose to focus on these 3 levers. Qi and Shen, right? Qi and spirit are wonderful. Some people maybe have a little tougher time grasping that, which I understand. And frankly, that's a little more about watch works rather than what time it is. What time it is very accessible to all people who can learn how to read a watch. And the watch in this case is themselves. But if you want to really learn how the watch works, then you need to go deeper, or you can go deeper to understand more about the energy systems within the body. And of course, how the spirit also interrelates with those. But those 3 levers are what I would label as the biggest levers of action within the body to drive change.
This is all great, and you articulate the idea so well. You can tell that you've really given this to a lot of people.
Thank you.
And power to you, and God bless you and them, and I just want to remind listeners. It's about 9:30, 9:40. You've got it tuned to Kmart and with Javi and Nona. This is Chi Talks, and we're talking with Sifu Paul Mcintyre from Newport Laukundo, Temple of Martial Arts. And I love how you've made this monastic tool accessible.
Thank you for saying so. That's a kind compliment, I think. Yeah.
I think it's the, your own personal experience too, Paul. I know, you work your job and then you work as a teacher, at your temple, and then you're a father to 3 beautiful children, partner to your wife is just so full, son to your parents. And I think a lot of people can really relate to that. Like, when and how do you do this deep inner work? And I think this is a really great assessment tool that, if you get into the habit of doing and popping in 5 minutes here, 5 minutes there, like you um, suggested, it's so accessible. That's really
Absolutely. Well, thank
important.
you. I appreciate that.
Yeah, yeah.
And maybe it might be meaningful, since we did talk about meditation, if you two are interested. So where does it go from there?
Mm.
What we've been talking about outcomes to assess ourselves and ways that we can try to affect body, breath, or mind. But what does that do for us, other than a myriad of super great things, by the way, right? Self-awareness, self-knowing, self-adjustment and attunement, self-refinement and self-improvement. There's a host of really wonderful things that come out of that. But if we were talking about meditation, or you have somebody who wants to go deeper, either into those last two legs of Qi and spirit, or maybe just wants to develop a meditative practice, wants to be able to calm the mind, right? If I keep coming back to a self-assess and visit, and I think, boy, my mind is continually being triggered, either because of the emotional state of my life or complexity of my life or other things. My mind is just very busy. I have a lot of balls I'm juggling in the air. And I want to practice, maybe, or build a practice to help calm my mind. For many of us, if the mind is chaos or busy, let's say, we've already talked about getting the mind to calm down. So you could read many meditation books, might say, well, if your mind is super busy, just sit down, get comfortable, and then empty your mind. Empty my mind. Yeah, so that lasts for about 1.5 minutes, and then the mind is chaos, screaming, right? Screaming chaos, and you open your eyes and think, yeah, I'm never going in there again. That's crazy. This, in a way, means, well, I tried to pull the mind lever, maybe without necessarily the skill to do that, and I went inside and I saw the waterfall. So I'm not ready to stand under the waterfall, and I'm not going back in there. This is where most people stop that I've experienced in meditation. Read a couple books, heard some people. They all told me I need to empty my mind, which, by the way, obviously the three of us know is not realistic. It's not possible. So newsflash, don't try to empty your mind. Emptiness will come over time, but that's not the goal. To me, in my humble opinion and experience, doing this assessment and choosing to adjust body and breath helps to create the stage. The stage is set to allow you then to start to look beneath the surface, under the hood, so to speak, to see what is going on. So if we self-assess, we find out what's going on, we make an adjustment with body or breath, which calms mind. Now we've provided the condition to maybe step in a little further and begin to allow the mind to calm down. So if you don't mind, for the listeners, maybe we could talk just a little bit. I'm sure you guys have reviewed it already on your show, but my explanation for mind, right? In the Eastern tradition, as we've been taught, the mind has two elements, right? Sometimes referred to as the horse and the monkey. But if you picture in your mind a box, just a square, that square that's in front of you, in front of your face, that's the image, that is the part of you that interacts with the life, the world around you, or our mask, as we would like to say, right? That's the part of my nature that has developed over time, my perceived self. It's what everybody sees me as. This for us is called the shin, or the emotional mind. So keep this relevant, right? The conscious and emotional mind is the forward-facing mind. It's the part of me that's talking to you right now, at least the predominant part, right? So that forward-facing part of me is the square that you look at. But if I ask you to take that square and I ask you to shift it slightly on edge, and notice that that square is not just a square, it's a block. behind that block, the three-dimensional aspects behind that block, that is the yi. That is the wiser sibling that sits behind the loud, noisy sibling that's always fighting for attention. And that older, wiser sibling sits back quietly and lets the younger sibling have all the attention. But it doesn't mean that he's not there or she's not there. So what is the yi then? That is the horse or the wisdom mind. So why does it matter about these two minds really that you're talking about? Why do I need to distinguish between one and the other? This, we are starting the process of learning that the two are different. They are together, but they are also separate. So for us laymen who are trying to understand ourselves more deeply and understand the inner workings of our mind, to me, one of the simplest ways to understand is that I'm taking, I think, Javi, you used the term, the watcher and is it the watcher?
Observer, observer,
Yeah.
and the observed.
Observer and the observed, which is a wonderful term. So who is observing who? More often than not, when my mind is chaotic, is that really me? Let me ask you, when your mind is going crazy, does that sound like a horse that's feeding in a pasture? Or does that sound like a monkey that's swinging from vine to vine and jumping up and down on tires in a cage? Right? Monkey. At least mine is a monkey. So in this case, we're seeking to be able to calm down that monkey, right? As our teacher says, to give it a banana. And more often than not, that banana is breath, to be able to calm the mind down enough to make it still. So when we use the yi, and I use that three-dimensional block concept because the wisdom mind is what we want to train to come forward. As my understanding, I want the yi to become stronger. I want the horse to become the dominant, the wisdom mind to become the more dominant aspect of my mind. But here's the most amazing part to me. When I recognize how my mind behaves, and we start that through assessment, are you looking at you? Who is looking at your body, your breath, and your mind? Is that your mind looking at your mind? Or is it a part of your mind observing your mind? And if that part of your mind is the observer, the wiser aspect of you that's evaluating yourself, you begin to come away with a really profound, and in my opinion, one of the most important outcomes, which is to recognize that you are not your thoughts and your thoughts are not you. So the emotional states that we are tethered to in our day-to-day lives, the things that upset us, sometimes also the things that bring us joy, right? But sadness, sorrow, anger, frustration, all of this emotional chaos that gets stirred up, the fights with our spouses, the triggered emotional states from things in the past, this is all emotional mind. This is all monkey, conscious mind. So when you strengthen the wisdom part of your mind, which comes through this assessment, comes through making adjustments, you are strengthening that part of yourself. And you can observe how the conscious mind behaves, and you see all of the turmoil that it creates. Now you have discovered something profound, because now you can begin to build the skill of recognition and hopefully control to learn to become the mechanic of your own mind. And when your mind is misbehaving, you have the opportunity to use that stronger wisdom mind that you can strengthen over time to regulate that emotional mind so that it does not control your life. That to me is a really, really powerful awareness. But if I'm already chaos and I can't use body and breath to downregulate mind, you're going to have a very hard time paying attention to what is really going on in the mind. So if we can use those levers of action and we can downregulate ourselves enough to provide the condition to look further. Then, when I just sit still for maybe just 5 minutes with my eyes closed, listening to self and relaxing. And of course, I'm sure you two will share all kinds of great methods, if you haven't already, on how to step maybe deeper into meditation. But if we can provide a space that we can begin to grow from, then we can start to observe ourselves, observe the behavior of the mind. Then we can start to build skill around not allowing that part of our mind control our lives. And that, to me, is a pretty powerful thing.
Very inspiring words. And there's so much to say. I love it all. We have about 10 minutes, and what you've presented, I agree how profound it can be, and it's very inspiring. And I don't know, there's so many paths we can go on from here, and so many questions I can ask. I just
I hope the listeners
love,
at least get something to sink their teeth into, to try to make a change, right? We've been very blessed to have a lot of deep conversations, and if we were together, I'm sure we'd be going into the wee hours talking about this.
Yeah, absolutely.
But for your listeners
I
who
love this.
are,
We'll have
I'm
to do a
glad that
part
they
2.
found you. I'm glad they found you to be able to say, okay, well, I'm here. They found your show. They're able to listen there, which means they're probably seeking, right? At least a little curious. I really hope to inspire them to trust themselves that you can do more than you think.
Mm.
Without all the complexity, you can change yourself. You can start today. You can do more than you think you can. Yeah.
I like this idea of pulling on the mind, or pulling on the body and the mind, pulling on the body and the breath lever so as to influence the mind. Yes, Dr. Young always says, how do you use the mind to regulate the mind? You would ask, how do you use the mind to regulate the mind? No? And this, when you speak about this, I also hear like self-mastery, a path towards self-mastery, and the idea of these regulations, these levers are interconnected, and there's a single rod that, if you will, is connected to all of these 3 levers in a way. So that single rod connects them. For me, I started saying like this body of the 5 regulations, body, breath, mind, are in a way this Qigong triad, if you will, that as you so laid out, are interwoven, interconnected. And if we can learn to influence one by stimulating, engaging with another, we can learn to self-learn, self-adjust, self-assess, and hopefully self-improve, and become, some of us are trying to seek that self-mastery, become the masters of ourselves. And I would say that this is a basis and creates the conditions, and if not meditation, self-care.
100%, I think. And by the way, you two already know the answer to this, but if you are moving, what does this do to your chi? What does this do to tension within the body?
Moves it.
Right? Yeah. So
it
starts
moves
to
away
circulate.
from a place. Yeah, exactly. Moves away from stagnation, a place of, moves away from being stuck to a place of fluidity.
And what does it do when we start to add the breath? So by breath, and of course, it's a little tricky because I know some people maybe are doing Wim Hof breathing, if they've heard of Wim, or they're doing something like Tumo that's more fire related breathing, and that's not necessarily down regulation for the central nervous system. So that's a little bit different, which is fine because it's still a breath modality. You're still going to have an outcome, not good, not bad, just an outcome, and that's going to affect the way you feel internally. Right? So that's just an awareness to outcome. But if we're seeking to relax more deeply, to encourage energetic flow, right? If we're talking about qi. Again, number 4 is we start to dip into those other elements.
Right.
But as you'll probably recall, I'm sure, in layman society, they would not teach all these things. They would tell us what to do and we would do it. And that would be the outcome. Not because of our brilliance, but because we were told to move or breathe or fuel a certain way. And by doing those things in combination, the way the Eastern doctors, the TCM docs, and others would tell us, guess what would happen? Energy would renormalize, the qi would begin to rebalance to the organ system, and our bodies, our vessel would fall back into harmony with itself. And when that occurs, the mind calms down. So you've got stress reduction, cortisol reduction, you've got shifting into parasympathetic tone for your central nervous system out of a sympathetic state, which causes a host of, a myriad of other physical maladies. We are essentially, through these three primary levers, driving all of those outcomes without even knowing that it's occurring. But shh, don't tell them that, or they might not do it. Right? Yeah. If you are doing it, it's happening. It's happening whether you know it's happening or not. Even if you don't have the explanation for all the details of how energy moves within the body, or why that's so important, or why relaxation is so important. Never mind the jargon. It's happening. If you're doing it and you're feeling it and it's making the change to your baseline, it's happening.
Well, we're going to have to close it off there. This has been a great talk, as always.
Thank you. I agree.
And we really appreciate you taking time out of your busy schedule and your busy day to do this for us.
Pleasure. I hope your
listeners.
audience gets a little gem or two that they can try and practice. Yeah.
Quickly, if people have questions, if we can, give out maybe your contact info, and if people want to directly contact you, ask you more questions, we definitely have more questions, and hopefully have you back to dive deeper. How can we get a hold of you?
Yeah, so the temple website is Kung Fu Tai Chi OC, as in Orange County.com. So Kung Fu Tai Chi OC.com. My goodness, that seems like a mouthful, but you can remember that.
Yes.
And then the email they can reach out if they want to is info@Kung Fu Tai Chi OC. So very easy to send if they'd like to send an email. They can reach out via that way. Super easy to get a hold of me. Of course, I don't go on social media very much, but I do have a couple of things I share on there now and again. So there's a YouTube channel you can find under my name, Paul D. McIntyre, that's got some free Qigong exercises, some Tai Chi Chuan balance work, some controlled articular rotation stuff, some mobility training, etc. So you can find a bunch of goodies on there if you search, and if not, they can message me and I'll send the stuff for free for them.
Beautiful. So just for the listeners, Kung Fu, KUNGFU, Tai Chi, TAICHI, OC for Orange County, .com.
You got it.
All right, Paul, thank you so very much. Always a pleasure. So many memorable talks around that kitchen island counter over the years. And I'm so glad we got to share what a session might be like with our listeners today here.
Yeah,
very short 1 hour. Hope to connect with you again soon, and keep you posted if we get any people looking for you. We'll send them your way.
Happy to help if I can.
Thank you, listeners, for tuning in. Again, this was Qi Talks with your hosts, myself, Nona, and my partner here, Javi. Our guest has been Paul McIntyre, and we just finished up a session talking about the 3 levers and self-assessment. Let us know what you felt about this show. You can reach Javi and myself at talkingqi@gmail.com. That's talking, TALKING, Qi, spelled QI, @gmail.com. And coming up next is
Moon River Meandering.
Stay tuned.
Take care. Bye-bye.